happy Sunday. Hope everyone is safe wherever you are in the world. We are gonna get started today with the Business Analyst Success Path Group. We're doing our training on the Business Analyst interview case study. We had picked up this maybe 2 weeks ago. Today's the third session in the series. I think we'll have one more, but what we're gonna do today is we're gonna talk about some of the artifacts that are required for the case study. Really quickly, I'm gonna share my screen and go over what we've done in case we have new participants that are joining us for the very first time. We're doing a business analyst interview case study that is sometimes requested in some parts of the world for business analyst interviews. So what we did in the first week, we laid down how to do a case study. In the last week, we did, we worked on some of the artifacts that are due to submit for the case study. And all of those training sessions, both part 1, part 2, are in our group. So if you go back and check out the past videos, you'll find those. If you're not already in the group is called Business Analyst Success Path in Facebook. It's a group that we've started, Jeet Singh and myself started maybe a year ago. And we do live training every Sunday morning. Our time, we're in the United States, I'm in California, Jeet is in the East Coast. So we take time out every week to provide training. So feel free to give us topics in the group of anything else that you'd like to see. Even this case study was a suggestion by somebody in the group. So I believe Arinder had given us a suggestion. Today's part 3 in the series. So let's just go over what the case study was for. It's actually for a nonprofit organization. And they just outlined some of the issues and problems that they were having, and they wanted us to provide artifacts. And these are the artifacts that were due. Create a business process diagram. We did that last week. Describe the business process diagram. Again, we did that last week. Right, business rules and functional requirements. We did 1 through 4 last week. Today, we're gonna attempt to finish 5 and 6, which is pick any of the sub-process of the module and write a user story or use case. And then we're gonna do prototyping. And Jeet is gonna do these 2 items with us today. I'm thinking that next week we should do another session on how to bring all of these documents together and how to present, either if the interviewer has asked that you submit these documents or if they've called you in to present these documents, how best to do these, either in a presentation or a submission mode. And again, all the documents that we're working on and creating along with this PowerPoint will be available in the group when we're done. Okay, sounds good. Before we get started, any questions from anyone in the group? Okay, so with that, Jeet, can you all hear us?
Yes.
Jeet, are you there?
Yes, hey, good morning, everyone.
Morning. So I'm handing it over to you, Jeet.
All right, perfect. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So just as Sarbjeet mentioned, we went through the first few phases of understanding the case study, understanding what the organization needs. We created flow diagrams, we wrote functional requirements, and we understood what the organization is trying to do. So just an overview of what the organization does. It's a US-based nonprofit organization serving old age or senior citizen worldwide to alleviate social isolation. And the organization also has a pool of volunteers and social workers from across the globe associated via various outreach programs. And here's our goal. The client wants to develop modern, robust, responsive software solutions that help the internal staff to manage the associated old age people and volunteer social worker activities programs, which include their onboarding, into the organization, their eligibility to participate or contribute, which is program specific. So now that we have an overview of what the organization is looking to do, we understand our goal, we're going to go ahead and fast forward a little bit into this week's training, which is creating user stories from our requirements and putting together a wireframe, which is part of the artifacts. So all this information is available in the group. So if you've missed it, you can go back and review it. We'll just do a quick overview to what we covered in the last 2 weeks. So this is our overall diagram of how the program works. We have volunteers, social workers, the local departments and programs all feed into XYZ organization, which connects to the senior citizen folks. And then we also went a step further and created a as-is workflow. And then we saw how all the different pieces come together. So we have customers, volunteers, social workers, and local programs that all manually fill data into the system. And then it's a manual process, is what we learned from the documents that were provided to us. And from reading through it, we understood it was all a manual process, which was cumbersome. And one of the objectives was to alleviate some of that pain point of the manual work. So if we keep moving forward, this is the deliverable that we're working towards. And today we're going to cover part 5 and 6. And we'll walk through a good way of understanding what user stories are and how to write them really well. So here we go. What are user stories? What is a user story, and is it a use case? So I want everyone to understand that user stories and use cases are very different. They're both part of the agile world. Some organizations use them interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. What a user story is it's a description of a particular feature from an end user perspective. The user story describes a type of user, the user's interaction, and the value they get from it. Now, when a user story is written, and that usually comes first, then comes the use cases. And the use cases are usually, they have a precondition and they have a acceptance criteria. And one user story can have multiple use cases. An easy way to remember what a user story is, it's a high-level description of what the feature is going to do. So when you're working in the agile world, you'll be using tools like VSTS or Jira. And as you enter these user stories into a backlog or a pool of requirements, you don't want very lengthy, long descriptions. It's hard to read through when you have thousands of them. So the purpose of a user story is a high-level, short description of what that feature will do. And then when you drill down into that user story, you'll start seeing all the associated use cases that come or that are associated with the user story. Everyone clear on user stories and use cases? All right. So usually who is responsible for writing a user story? Anyone and everyone. Typically, this is something that the product owner does and puts it into the backlog. And if these terms aren't familiar to you, let us know. We can get further into it. These are all a part of the agile world. So there's backlogs, sprint backlogs, overall backlogs, and these user stories are all put into the backlog. And once a sprint started, which is an iteration cycle, we pull these user stories into that sprint, and then we work on them. Depending on the organization size or structure, the BA can be tasked with the responsibility to write the user stories. Whether it's the product owner or the BA, they do it together, or the BA just does it him or herself. Anyone in the organization or on the team can write the user stories. Why do we need to create user stories? This gives the team important context and associated tasks with the value that those tasks bring. So again, it gives you a high level understanding of what we're trying to accomplish with a certain feature and who we're trying to build it for. Is everyone good so far?
So let me get a temperature check. How many of the people that are attending right now attended the first 2 sessions?
Yes, sir, Abhijit, I have attended the previous 2.
Awesome. So awesome. So is this making sense? Guys, this training is not for us, it's for you guys. So if this is making sense, great. If it's not, if you guys have any questions, please stop. Because the goal is for this to make sense for you guys.
I have one question. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The product owner and BAs are both are same in the organization, or they are the 2 different people, or it depends on the organization?
Jeet, you want to take that?
Sure. So it depends. It depends on the size of the organization, where some organizations use the term product owner or product manager interchangeably, depending on the size of the organization. If it's a small organization, the product owner might be the product manager and might be the BA. In larger organizations, you have BAs, you have product managers, and then very high level is the product owner. So it depends on the size of the organization.
Okay, yeah, got it. Yeah, thank you.
Jeet,
No problem.
One question from my end. In use case, we particularly define the action or the responsibility one particular actor is going to perform. And it is in user stories, we deeper drill down the role and we write what particular actions are being performed by one particular actor. Is it?
So what you just said, reverse it. So the user stories, the use cases drill down in very specific details of what a person does. So when you're writing a user story, and the way that the agile methodology teaches us is, think of an index card. On the front of the index card, it's a few lines of a description that the user can perform with either a function or a feature, and what their end goal is. So we write that on the front of an index card, a 3x5 index card. And if you flip it on the back side, you write some use cases. So you write a precondition, what things need to be in order for this function or feature to perform. And then you write an acceptance criteria of how to validate if this use case works. So what you said is absolutely right. You just need to reverse it. The user story is a high level description, and then the use cases are the drill down, detailed paths a user can take. They both will capture an actor, and you want to separate user stories and use cases by an actor. So, and I actually put some of that together so we can review it together. So use cases are, a user story will have multiple use cases behind it to drill down each user story further, so a developer and a user can understand it. And then these can be used to create test cases. And it's always written in business language. So business language means that anyone can pick up a user story, read it, and understand what we're trying to do, what the actor is trying to do, what feature they're trying to use, and what their end goal is in using this feature or function.
Okay, got it. So we have acceptance criteria in use case instead of user stories.
That is correct. Yep.
That's correct? Yeah. Okay.
That's correct.
Got it.
And again, a lot of these companies use these interchangeably, these words, but I want to make sure I made it clear, based on agile methodologies, user stories and use cases are very different because of the function they serve. We have high level description, and then you have very detailed use cases, which are individual things a user can do with that user story or within that user story.
I think what you just mentioned is correct because I was working for one of the project in which the user stories have the acceptance criteria, and
Right.
yeah,
So if you've ever used any of the tools that I mentioned, Jira or VSTS, it's broken down into sections on a screen. So on the left-hand side, or a lot of companies, what they do is they put a user story and use case into one section. Above the use cases, there's always a very high level description of what this user story does. And then underneath, you'll have multiple use cases, multiple use cases with multiple acceptance criteria. So that is for a developer, when he looks at this, he sees a user story, he understands the high level of what this function is supposed to perform and who's the function user. And then when they read the use cases, they can understand what are different ways this actor will engage with this feature and what their expected outcomes are.
okay, okay. Jeet, a question related to acceptance criteria. Like whenever
Sure.
we are writing the functional requirements, what we need to make sure is it we need to make sure that all the acceptance criteria are getting fulfilled. Is it what we need to make sure?
So when you write functional requirements, you're putting, and we covered this. So let me see if I can go back. So right here, we covered this last week. So when you write functional requirements, you, and this is going back to waterfall methodology, you write in a way that a system shall or a system must, right? So a system, the second one, a system must allow a process for volunteers and social workers to pass a background check prior to an application getting approved. Now, this is in a functional setting. We're telling the developer that there must be a way for volunteers and social workers to go through a background check. We're not defining how they're going to do it. And in user stories and use cases, we don't do that either. Here, also, we have an actor, which is the volunteers and social workers. But when we get into a user story, the user story may say the same thing, but in a different format, which is typical in the agile world. And in the use cases, what you want to do, a good use case is a very single action item, which you can test against. So a use case might be that as a volunteer and you want to separate volunteer and social worker because they are two separate actors. So you want to write two use cases. So as a volunteer, I want a process where I can check my background eligibility, right? And the acceptance criteria would define what that is, what that background check process might look like. So when a developer develops something, he can look at the acceptance criteria where if he has a arrest record, he'll be denied. So they can do a very quick unit test and understand that their piece of code that they've written is actually working or not. And that's the purpose of acceptance criteria and use cases that are derived from user stories.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Okay. All good question, guys. If these are the things we want you to understand before we move forward, so everyone's on the same page.
Thank
Okay,
you. That was a really good overview.
So as I was mentioning, how do we write user stories? So there's a typical format that everyone uses, and it's recommended because it's very easy to remember and very concise. So here's the template. As a type of user, I want some feature so that some reason. So think of it as your go-to. You always want to remember this template. It will make your life a lot easier. And the more you write user stories, the better you will get at writing these user stories. I remember when I first started writing user stories, they were really bad. And I would go back and I would refine them. And the more experience you get, the better your user stories will become. So who, the type of user is the who. And this is the thing you want to mention, the 3 W's. The who, Who are we building this for? Who is the user? So the type of user is our actor. Some feature is the what we're building. What are we building and what is the intention for building that feature? And some reason is the why. Why are we building this? What is the value for the customer? So as I mentioned, the 3 W's, who, what, why, will make your life easier when you're writing user stories if you remember this format and remember this key of who, what, and why. So also, when we're creating user stories, this can be used and it is used in the Agile world, and it's used in the waterfall world, depending on your organization, how thorough they like to be. They're called user personas. Anyone familiar with what user personas are, or has anyone used them in the past?
No, Jeet.
Okay. So a user persona is your functional characters, your fictional characters, which you create based on your research in order to represent the different user types that might use your service, product, site, or brand in a similar way. Creating a persona will help you understand your user's need, experiences, behaviors, and goals. So once we write our functional requirements, or even before we start writing our functional requirements or user stories or use cases, we have to understand who are we building for, what are we building, and why are we building. So what companies like to do, and this usually might come from the marketing team, this might come from a different team, maybe it's innovations team, that they're trying to understand their audience. So what usually happens is they create personas, and these are fictional characters. They are trying to understand who their market is, their audience is. So they come up with a person, a fictional person, and they put details of what this person likes, dislikes, what their goals are for using the system that they're trying to develop. And once you create user personas, it helps you understand what your user is like and how they will engage your system that you're developing. So as a BA, you might be involved in this process. So for our exercise, what I did is I created a few personas for us. So I've created 3 personas here. We have Susie, who is the senior citizen. And then I put some details. Susie is 66 years old. She's a widow. She enjoys Tai Chi. She enjoys hiking, playing chess, and social events. Susie is not good with technology and owns a flip phone. So no smartphones for Susie. And she lives in the LA County. Now, Susie's goal is to engage with like-minded folks in the similar age group. So that is going to be one of our characters, which we've understood is the person that we're developing this for to eliminate isolation. And we know that she's not good with technology. So our system said, or our requirement said, that it needs to be low tech, not so hard to use. And I've also put in where she lives because we have a match radius. Now, Emily is a social worker. Was there a question?
No, Jeet.
Okay. So now we have another actor that we're trying to develop the system for social workers. So now Emily is a social worker. She's a counselor at a local agency, social agency of LA County. Emily holds a master's degree in social work. She creates programs and services to benefit community. And she likes to volunteer her free time at a community center. And her goal is to participate in senior adult outreach programs. Now, Emily also has, so as we can tell, she's also from the LA County area. She holds a degree in social work. She already has a job, and she also likes to volunteer her free time. And our third actor here is Peter, who's a volunteer. Now, volunteers are also a crucial part of this program. Peter is a 19-year-old college student. Peter also lives in LA County. He's going to college to earn a social work degree. So he's on the same path as Emily, who's already a social worker. Peter enjoys volunteering at various community programs, and his goal is to earn social work credits to graduate early. So now these look like perfect candidates for our program, but what you want to do is also include personas that might not fit what you're doing, just so you can create alternate paths. So the first three personas we see here are perfect for our case. They are our happy path. And then you also want to include personas which don't meet the happy path, which is called the alternative path. So we have Joe and Liz. Joe is a high school senior. He's 17 years old. He's on the high school debate team. He's good with technology, lives in San Francisco County, and wants to complete community service to put on a college application. And then we have Liz. Liz is 25 years old, lives in LA County. Driver's license has been suspended, and she is an introvert and does not like spending time with others. And her goal is to complete court-ordered community service. So just looking at these, you can tell which are good for us and which are bad for us. And you want to keep some that don't work for us because you want to understand how the system behaves when this condition comes up. So from looking at this, what's wrong with Joe and Liz, based on the requirements we've gathered in our last 2 weeks?
Joe is 17 years old. We require at least 18 years.
Perfect. Yes, that's one. That's very good.
Right, that's one thing. And in terms of about Liz, his license is suspended. We require that must have the driving license or something. That is also
yes, a valid driver's license. Good.
Right.
One other thing. There's one other thing on here, and it's in the last two. It's between Joe and Liz. There's one other thing. All right. So
Liz might have a criminal record.
She might, yes, because there's court-ordered community service. So that's a good assumption. And also, if you notice, Joe lives in San Francisco County. So if you guys aren't familiar with California State, this might be hard to pick up. LA County and San Francisco County are far apart. So we have a radius of how close people need to be in order to match. So that would make them disqualifying. So if he was 18 years old, he would pass, but then he would disqualify based on where he lives. So once you start building personas, you get a good understanding of who your audience is, who your actors are, because now we have a picture, we have some details. We can reference this persona card as we're writing our user stories or even requirements. And then you can identify your immediate happy path or your alternative path where the system does its checks and says, well, this won't work and this will work. So it makes it very easy for you to understand instead of just thinking, oh, what does this person do? How will this person use our system? If you use a persona card, it will make your life easier because now you've written everything down and you can always write your stories against your persona. So now, taking what we've just discussed, let's create some user stories. We have our template. As a type of user, I want some features, so that's some reason, right? The who, what, and why. So now Susie is our actor. And as a type of user, so as a senior citizen, number one, we're going to do, I want an easy sign-up process for XYZ program. So that's the feature. The sign-up is the feature. And the reason is so that I can determine my eligibility for an anti-isolation program. So now we understand we have a type of user, and you always want to write it from the user perspective. You don't want to use their name because names can change, but the actor, their type of user always stays the same. So as a senior citizen, the feature I'm looking for is an easy sign-up process. And the reason why is that she can determine her eligibility for the XYZ program. So it's very simple, very high level, and it's usually written like the way it's showing on the screen. So let's do another one. As a senior citizen, I want to locate a local program for seniors so I can engage with people my age. Again, we have the actor, the senior citizen. The feature is to locate local programs. And the reason is so the senior citizen can engage with people their age. And when I mentioned earlier, you want to write this in business language. Business language is how a business would describe their users. So it's not technical, it's not very complicated, it's simple language, business language, where anyone can look at this, read it, even if you're not a part of the program, could understand what this person's looking for and how the company will resolve that need. So another one here. As a senior citizen, I want phone call notifications so that I can know when new events are added. So now, as a type of user, we have the senior citizen. The feature is phone call notifications so that the reason is that the senior citizen can know when new events are added. Now, when we're looking at the persona card, we see that the senior citizen is not good with technology, right? And doesn't know how to use technology. So maybe Susie wants phone calls to let her know when new events are added because she doesn't have a smartphone or she doesn't like using the internet to get notifications and whatnot. So that helps us understand what her needs are and how to develop a system better for our end users. Here's another one. So as a senior citizen, I want an easy way to find someone to drive me to the park so I can attend my local Tai Chi classes. So again, we have the type of user, the senior citizen. We have the feature is an easy way to find someone, right? So we are talking about the matching system. And the reason is so she can attend her local Tai Chi class in the park and whatnot. So again, we have the type of user, a feature, and a reason. Everyone understand what we're doing here?
Yes, Jeet.
Yes, Jit. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Any questions on why we did what we did?
So, Jeet, just to summarize what you told, for the different stages of the process that you're writing, you're actually dividing them into user stories and writing it in the format. Am I right?
Right. So when you're doing this, think of it that when you're writing user stories, this is your prerequisite of a user story. You want to understand your end user, right? When
Right.
you're displaying this or when you're on the job, there's not going to be a phase or a window where your manager says, okay, create personas. They might, depending on the organization, but this is something you should keep in mind of doing something like this that helps you understand why you're writing your user stories. And then it also helps when somebody asks you, why was this user story written? What was the intention behind it? You can open up your persona page and say, well, this is the ideal user, and this is why we wrote these user stories.
Okay, Jeet, I would like your perspective on, say there are instances where we will be dividing it as epics, features, and user stories, right? So can you bring that perspective here, by by just telling me what can we keep it as epic, what can we keep as feature, and how to divide the user stories into that. I think a verbal explanation will do, if you can.
Sure.
Or if
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So we have epics, and for everyone on the call, this is agile world we're talking about. We have epics, we have features, and then we have requirements, which are the user stories. Epic is the overarching feature, the big feature, and or the big function. The features are individual portions of that. So for this, if we go back, so for this, epic would be our matching system, or you know what? Actually, let's do this. An epic would be our home page. The features would be different portions of that home page of sign in, sign up, events, images, your navigation. So those would be all features within that epic, which is our home page. And then individual user stories under those features would be what are the sign-in buttons, how do they use, where do they take them, what are the different events that are going to happen on this page, what are the pictures, what is the logo, the color scheme. So those would be all requirements. So epic is the big picture. Features are how we're going to get to that big picture. And then the user stories are what do these features do and how do we get there?
Yep. Thank you.
No problem. So as we went through one user, now, as I mentioned, we have different types of users, and I want to be mindful of our time. We have 15 minutes left. So for this part, I started it out for you guys so you guys can practice. Remember, this is the format that we would like you to use, and this would help you in your career and as you guys are creating user stories. So Emily is a social worker. You can go ahead and fill this out. As a social worker, I want some feature, so that's some reason. So you guys can practice this and remember to keep it short and concise to what this user is trying to accomplish with your system.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So user story, this is where we're going to end user stories. Everyone have a good grasp on what user stories are and why we're using them?
Yes, did. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Perfect. So
Yes.
the next part was to prototype a complete process. Now, when they say prototype a complete process, they're not asking you to prototype the whole end-to-end. Hey, yes.
I think there was a question. Was there
Oh,
a
I'm sorry.
question? Okay, sorry about that. I thought there was a question.
No problem. So now the last portion of this case study was to prototype a complete process. It's not expected of you to complete a complete process end to end and think about everything. What I would recommend is you pick a portion that you want to demonstrate that you have an understanding and you've thought through the whole process of that single feature. So you can do some very high level prototyping that shows that you've thought about how a particular user will engage the system. So drill down, once you have your user stories down, you have your requirements written, you want to focus on one particular user and one particular scenario. So for you to completely design an end-to-end prototype of how the whole system will work, it is impossible. And if you feel like you should do that and you feel you're up to the challenge, then by all means you should do that. But for case studies, they want to understand, and what they're looking for is that you have an understanding of writing a requirement and then converting written words, which are the requirements or the user stories, and turning them into illustrations of how the system will look and how closely what you're designing is related to your requirements that you've written. So there should be one-to-one between the user stories, your requirements, your flow diagrams, and what you're designing on the screen as prototypes. We had a full section on user stories, requirements and wireframing. Is there a question?
I just muted them. No, I think there was just some sidebar conversation. I've muted them. Go ahead.
Okay. So if you want further understanding of how wireframes work and how you can relate them to requirements and flow diagrams, you can look in the group. We did a full class on just wireframing. So you can go back and reference that session and you'll get a really good understanding of how to update your requirements, your flow diagram, and create wireframes. And that can be found in the group as well. So for this, what I've done is for the, let's say the Epic piece was prototyping or creating a homepage. So on this, what I've done is what I thought, and I'm thinking through as the user type of a senior citizen. And our requirement said that it needs to be easy to sign up. Our assumptions were made that there's going to be a sign up portal in the local office that somebody can help them sign up with. So what I've tried to do when creating this prototype was keep it very simple, not giving a lot of options to do different things. So it's very clear and concise. We might have the company logo here. I put it on the left-hand corner. You can put it on the right-hand side. I put a large picture, maybe of past events. I've also put upcoming events because this is a business. Even though it's a nonprofit, they want other people to sign up. So maybe you want to show what other events are happening in the future. And then very simple, I put a sign up button and a sign in button. So if you're new, you want to sign up. And if you're already a member, you want to sign in. All right. Now, so once you click sign in, I've created another page for the participant. So first time sign up for a participant or senior citizen. What information does our company need, which is the XYZ organization? What do they need in order to match the senior citizen with a social worker or a volunteer and see if they're eligible for the program? So obviously we need their name, their information, their first name, middle name, last name. We also want their date of birth because we want to know if they're 65 years or older. We want a phone number so we can call them with updated information to tell them that there's new events happening, or let's say an event that they signed up for has been canceled. And then you want to see if they accept text or not. If they say yes, then we can send them text messages of updates. And we also want an email address so we can email them about new opportunities. We also want their address information. Now, the way I've created it is for the US. Obviously, if you're living in a different part of the country or if you're in India, these address options will be different. So maybe you want to think about, as you're creating this, since it's a global organization, maybe you want to think of different ways where you can maybe pick which country you live in first, and then these options change. So you want to be mindful of your requirements that you've written and how you're creating your wireframes. So for this scenario, Susie lives in the US, so we're going to display the US format. So we enter the address, the city, the state, the zip code, and then we'll use this address portion to see how far they are from other social workers, volunteers, if they fit that criteria of that 20-mile radius that we set up. Now, also, as a senior citizen, we also want an emergency contact. They're older, they live alone. God forbid something happens at one of the events, you want somebody that you can contact in the case of emergency. So for them, we really don't want to know where this emergency contact lives. We just want their name and a phone number. Maybe we should also include what their relationship is. So as you go through this and you're looking back at requirements, you can understand that we're missing something. So I just noticed that I'm missing a relationship status. So I can add that here, but then I should go back to my requirements and add that on the sign up page for participants, for senior citizens, we need a relationship for emergency contacts. All right. So we have a next button. We can click on next, and then we'll come to the next page where now I'm just thinking of what information we need, right? So what activities are you interested in? So a senior citizen might be interested in some of these activities, none of these, and you can put anything in here. So like hiking, Tai Chi, chess, poker, dancing. So any kind of activities that the program offers, you can put that in here. But for our purposes, you actually don't have to list anything. You're just showing that you've thought this through from an end user perspective of what would we want information on. So you can just list this as activities or event name, and this can be populated later. Even in real life projects that I've worked on, when we're doing initial passes and it's very low fidelity wireframes like this is, I would leave it like this and then come back later and fill things out, because right now we're just showing that there's a placeholder for certain information to be populated. We don't have to think of everything on day one. You just want to put a placeholder for that. And then you can click next and go back. You can create this for a social worker or volunteer. What we can do is I can put the link for this diagram in our presentation. So you can actually pick this up where I left this off and use it and build on top of it, or maybe just start over, start fresh. But the program I was using is the same program we use to do our flow diagrams with. It's called draw.io. And we can put that link in it, and we can give you this file so you guys have a starting place to work with, practice, and try to build your own if you want to try it. So again, free tool, web-based, and we can give you the file so you have a starting place. And then for next week, we'll cover how to pull all this information together and put it in a presentation form or a submission, and how you can do that, what are the best practices behind it. And that we'll cover in the next week's topic.
Okay, how's everybody doing? Did all of this make sense? Was it helpful?
Yep.
Okay, so what we'll do again, I thought we could cover it this week, but I don't think with 5 minutes left, I don't want to do it disservice by just, talking about how to present this, all this great work that we've done over the last 3 weeks. So let's, the topic for next week then will be how to kind of package all of the things that we've done and put it in presentation for our interviewer, because this is for a business analyst interview. And you guys see how much work goes into creating these use cases and why the interviewer wants to know your thought process. So this, if you're watching this and you're kind of intimidated by the process, don't be, right? When Jeet and I started working on this case study, we didn't know that we were going to be able to do or wanted to do all of this. When you start to work on a case study, all of these things will come up, because as you start to either create business flow diagrams, you'll say, okay, well, I don't have requirements to create that. So then that's what will prompt you to start writing down requirements. And when you start writing down those requirements, that's how you get the flow diagrams. That's how you get the functional requirements. That's how you create business rules so that you can, have guidelines on your requirements. That's how you create your use cases, your personas. Everything falls in place once you start thinking about this and you start documenting your assumptions and your requirements. Sounds good?
Yes, Ravi.
Yes.
Awesome. And then I want to a special shout out to Arvinder. He has been amazing in this suggestion and also participation. You guys all have asked lots of questions, but I want to thank Arvinder for giving us this suggestion so that we can work on it. I think it's been really helpful to go through a process from start to finish and understanding all the things that are required to do a case study. So Arvinder, thank you so much for participating. Thank you for the suggestion. And thank you for all that you do in the business analyst community. Guys, he's doing a lot. So I want to give you, Arvinder, a minute to talk about what you do for the business analyst community and allow other people to join your community as well. So go ahead if you want to spend a minute talking about that.
Thanks, Sarabjit. I would like to add a word here. So I have to thank you for giving the forum to actually, to explain this case study, because when I was trying to, transition to BA role, so I did not know much about the interview. So I went on one interview to another and one on another, actually failing at these type of case studies when I got it. So I didn't know how to approach it, to be very honest. So,
Okay.
and I was actually in search of a forum to actually, so there are many people out there who are struggling to do what is the kind of expectation of this case study. So I wanted I wanted a forum with a person who has a vast amount of business analyst experience to go over this. So it's like there are many people out there, so this is a thought that not many people should face this, and it should reach as many people as possible.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
had actually collected those templates as a part of this initiative sometime back itself. And so it's been quite some time. It's been a month search for a forum to to get a forum to have this in place and give those kind of suggestions. And I thank you and Jeet for giving such a wonderful practical demonstration of how a case study should be. And I think it's worth the search, the months of search that I have been doing for a forum to to showcase this case study and this explanation. I think the wait was worth. And I would like to give a kudos to both of you, for taking this up and helping out people with very clear expectations. And the training is also awesome, and I'm glad that this is happening right now.
Thank you. That's so amazing. Thank you so much for that. Jeet, you want to say something?
Yeah, and I appreciate those kind words. And the whole purpose behind this is we were all, when we started, we were in the same place as you guys, Mayfield, you are in. But the only difference was when we started, we didn't have such forums. So we had to do a lot of reading on our own, learn on the job, ask a lot of questions. So when the thought came up to start a group that we can give back, and we've learned a lot of different strategies, tips, and tricks over our careers, and we wanted to give back because we still see that people are struggling, even with so much knowledge on the internet. It doesn't seem practical because no one's pulling it all together. So we wanted to take this opportunity and share that with whoever needs it. Again, this only works if you guys ask questions, because we already know what we're doing. We've been doing it for so many years. So we want to share that with you guys. And if you guys ask questions, we can answer those questions and help you figure out what the next steps are. If you're struggling on the job, we use the group and ask questions, and we'll provide those answers. And hopefully we can make your life easier than ours was when we started.
Yeah, absolutely. We we have, I can't say about Jeet, but I know I made a lot of mistakes when I started, right? I started as a junior business analyst and I didn't know what the role was. It was just, I was sick and tired of my old job. I wanted something different and my recruiter sent me in. So there I was, a junior business analyst, and I had no clue. So I definitely have made my share of mistakes, messed up projects, you know, and that's how we all learn. But what Jeet is saying, and what I, you know, when we started working on this group, we want this to be a safe environment, right? If you guys have questions or concerns or like something doesn't make sense, because there's lots of people, and I see videos all the time, you guys, and there's misrepresentation on stuff all the time, right? And again, not saying that they are doing that on purpose, you know, maybe that's their thought process or what, how they learn things, right? So what we're trying to do here is give you our feedback, our approach to doing things. And even with this case study, we wanted to represent what, if Jeet or I were working on this case study, what would we do? So if you look at somebody else who worked on the same case study, their output and their results would be very different. So again, going back to the goal of the case study is what your interviewer is trying to see is your thought process and your logical progression of how you took something very anonymous, something that doesn't make any sense, doesn't outline really what the problem is, and how did you go through the process and the motions of coming up with something, you know, at the end. So if you are intimidated by all the things that we've done, don't be, right? What they're not looking for, as we started when we were working on this case study, is not the right or the wrong answer, but the interviewer is trying to see if you have an analytical mindset where you're trying to solve a problem, and that's all. And as you start working through the case study, you'll think about things that are missing and, you know, identify those either in requirements as in business rules. And I love the way that G did the personas that, you know, easily for those people that had watched the previous sessions, it was very easy for them to identify based on either our business rules or requirements, those participants, I believe, I forget the names now, I'm really bad with names. Those participants did not qualify based on our requirements. So, you know, that's why those requirements and business rules are used to make sure that you eliminate people and events or processes that don't belong there. So again, great. Thank you so much, Arvinder. Another shout out to you. Thank you everyone for participating. As Jeet said, we've been doing this for a long time. So sometimes when we say things, we just are saying them just because they make sense to us or the way that we've put them in our brain. But because you guys have questions or are not clear about something, the only way that we can help make things possible or make them for you guys to understand them is if you ask those questions. So we encourage you guys to ask questions. I know we're a little bit over time, so I'll summarize and say, next week's session will focus on how to present your case studies in the best approach possible, whether they're asking you to submit them via an email before the interview, or they're suggesting that you come in and present to a group of folks as a panelist. I've seen that as well. So how best to do those, and that'll be the topic for next week. And again, these sessions are possible because Arvinder gave us a suggestion to do this. If you guys have topics or things that you want the training to be on, please let us know. And Jeet and I will do our best to present those topics to you guys. And I'm done with my spiel, you guys. If there's nothing else, you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you guys back next week. Thank you so much for this time.